As a psychiatrist, you have a toolbox, lots of different interventions you can kind of pull on. How does hypnosis kind of intersect with pharmacotherapy and other forms of psychotherapy?
Well, I'm a psychiatrist. I do that. You want to use it. I use it as a first resort because if it works, we'll know very quickly. If it doesn't, then we may go on to other things. I may add antidepressants in particular if people are also depressed, although hypnosis can help with some kinds of depression. But for me, in the kind of practice I have, it's a first resort, not a last resort. I get a lot of patients from other psychiatrists for whom it's a last resort, not a first. And there are other kinds of psychotherapy. I do supportive psychotherapy for people who, have issues that make them depressed, or I've done other kinds of psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. But I would say in general, among psychiatrists, it's not that widely used, and so they'll refer to people like me rather than do it themselves. Although some more and more are using it now in their practice, particularly when there's an identifiable problem, symptom-related problem, where they think it could make a difference, or where it could help people kind of come to terms with some longer-standing issues that are troubling them.
You mentioned your father a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where this journey of yours with hypnosis begins?
Well, yes. I mean, he learned hypnosis from a Viennese refugee who had studied hypnosis in Vienna, was driven out by the Nazis, but couldn't serve in the U.S. military. So he taught young army doctors how to use hypnosis, and my father used it in combat for controlling pain, for dealing with combat stress reactions. He had a soldier who became paralyzed. He couldn't walk. And it turned out in hypnosis, he said that he saw his friend get shot, and they were ordered to retreat. And he had to choose between helping his friend and following orders and going out. He left, and he felt terribly guilty. He said, "My legs should not have carried me away from my friend," that kind of thing. And again, there's one of these things where people would rather feel guilty than helpless. He didn't choose to be in a war. He was in it, and things like that happen. And my father said, in hypnosis, I want you to look at how your friend is lying. Look at him. And you notice that his feet are pointing down. So he's not lying on his back resting. He's dead. And the guy said, oh, yeah, he probably was dead. He was very badly wounded. And he started walking. And so he used it for that, so the dinner table conversations were pretty interesting. When I got to medical school, I thought, well, the least I ought to do is take a hypnosis course, so I did. And my first patient I was at Children's Hospital in Boston, and the nurse says, Spiegel, your patient has status asthmaticus, and she's in room 734 or something. And I followed the sound of the wheezing down the hall. And in there is a pretty redhead 15-year-old girl, bolt upright in bed, knuckles white, struggling for breath. Her mother's standing there crying. The nurse is in the room. And I didn't know what else to do. They tried epinephrine twice under her skin, didn't work. They were considering general anesthesia. She'd been hospitalized every month for 3 months. They were going to put her on steroids. And I said, would you like to learn a breathing exercise? She nods. So I get her hypnotized. And then I start to sweat because I realized we hadn't gotten to asthma in the course yet. I'm a third-year medical student. What do I know? So I said something very clever and subtle. I said, each breath you take will be a little deeper and a little easier. And within 5 minutes, she's lying back in her bed. She's not wheezing anymore. Her mother stopped crying. The nurse ran out of the room. My intern comes looking for me, and I figure he's going to pat me on the back and say, what in the hell did you do? He said, the nurse has filed a complaint with the nursing supervisor that you violated Massachusetts law by hypnotizing a minor without parental consent. Now, Massachusetts has a lot of weird laws, but that's not on the list. And in any event, her mother was standing right there next to me when I did it. And he said, well, you'll have to stop doing it. And I said, why? He said, it's dangerous. And this is the thing you see with hypnosis, Simon, that either they think it's ridiculous and a stage show trick, or it's really dangerous, And I said, well, you're going to give her general anesthesia and you think my talking to her is dangerous? I don't think so. Take me off the case if you want, but I'm not going to tell my patient something I know is not true. So he stomps out of the room. And he goes and has a council of war with the chief resident and the attending physician and all that. And they came back on Monday and they said, they had a radical idea. They said, let's ask the patient. I don't think they'd ever done that before. And she said, oh, I like this. So she had one subsequent hospitalization and went on to study to be a respiratory therapist. And I figured that anything that could help a patient that fast, that safely, violate a non-existent Massachusetts law had to be worth looking into. And that was the first of my 7,000 patients, because I just saw it right there in front of me. And so it's sort of tapping into the ability people naturally have to make themselves better. But sometimes they don't do that. They make themselves worse. So teach them how to make things better rather than worse. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
In that journey where you've now treated 7,000 patients, have you noticed a change, I guess, in the perception of hypnosis within the medical community? You know, that reaction that you referred to there is due to, I guess, the stigma that's associated with hypnosis. As more and more research has come out, are you seeing that type of reaction, that stigma, wane?
Well, Simon, I'd say we're getting more what I would call grudging respect. I mean, I got a job at Stanford. I do research on hypnosis. I was asked to start a Center for Integrative Medicine. We're using it now. I've published a whole lot of papers, and other colleagues have too. There are professional hypnosis societies. So in that sense, it's better, yes, but it's not nearly where it needs to be. And that's why we need Reverie and apps like it, like Nerva, like One Leaf in France, to help people learn to do it for themselves. I'm taking a different path at this point.